Thank you, Daphne. Thanks everyone for being here today. I appreciate it. President Trump spoke yesterday on the floor of the UN and delivered a very clear message. And he thinks the United Nations and so many nations of the world have just gotten wildly off track with climate change, exaggerating it into the world's greatest threat. It has spurred massive amounts of spending with very little positive impact. We've raised, the race for net zero has really achieved three things. More expensive energy costs. The more people have gone into so-called climate action, the more expensive their energy has become. That lowers people's quality of lives and reduces their life opportunities. It's led to deindustrialization. Think of the United Kingdom and Germany, industrial powerhouses. They've raised their energy prices so much, people don't manufacture there anymore. It doesn't reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It just sends those factories, those jobs, those opportunities, mostly to Asia, where natural gas-powered plants are now powered by coal, and then the goods are loaded on ships, diesel-powered ships, and brought back, and they call that green or climate action. That's not climate action. The other, I would say, downside, huge downside of this focus on net zero is we've reduced energy access. About 1 billion people live lifestyles remotely recognizable to all of us. Wearing fancy clothes and traveling on motorized transport and turning light switches on and off. 7 billion people, they want to live lives like us too. The only road from here to there is massively more energy. President Trump got elected to stop the nonsense of the Biden administration, where we didn't grow American electricity production, but we raised the cost of it by 25%. We have plans to shut down 100 more plants in the United States that provide firm, reliable power, whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. They have plans to close 100 more. How are we going to reindustrialize America? How are we going to win the AI race on that trajectory? President Trump's agenda is look at data, look at facts, evaluate trade-offs. Climate change, like every other issue, is a trade-off. But we have a cure massively more expensive than the worst case of the disease. We're going to bring back data, we're going to bring back science and open, honest dialogue. No more cancel culture. You can't say anything about climate change or you'll be shouted down. In fact, we published a 140-page report from the Department of Energy on climate change. 5 top scientists full of data on temperature, on sea level rise, on ocean pH, on fertilization impacts, just a broad study. It's a lot of foot stomping and anger has been in response to that report. In all the reports, including the National Academy's report that came out a week or two ago, there is no disagreement with what's in the report. It's just either changing the topic to models or what the future might bring. Please, if the data and what we've said is wrong, as I read in countless newspaper articles, it's discredited data, what in the climate report is wrong? I did find one and only one quantitative disagreement with what was in our climate change report. We reported that there's been 8 inches of sea level rise from the year 1900 to 2024. 124 years, 8 inches of sea level rise. And the National Academy report that started with huffing and puffing of the science is irrefutable and climate change is a disaster. They said the sea level rise from 1900 to 2024 is 7 inches. Well, maybe it's 7.5 inches, and we got to correct a historical sea level rise by 1/2 inch. This is not changing facts, not changing data, not changing trade-offs. So we're very welcome to have an honest dialogue about the trade-offs with climate change, with human life. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, #1 is poverty. #2 is hunger, education, safety. These are the big issues of the world. Climate change is 13 in the Sustainable Development Goals, but yet it's all the oxygen, it's all the money. $5 trillion of subsidized and mandated expenditures on wind, solar, and batteries. Congratulations, 2.6% of global energy last year for that $5 trillion, 2.6%. And everywhere the penetration was highest. I mentioned the European nations. I'll mention California in our own country. California has by far our highest electricity prices, except for Hawaii because it's an island. That's what climate policy or pushing wind, solar, and batteries into your grid does. It makes energy more expensive, it hurts people's lives, and does almost nothing for global greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, 5 or 10 years from now, if we're going to give a climate hero award from those groups that are focused on greenhouse gas emissions reduction, I think overly so, President Trump is going to win that award. Because what's his focus? Common sense, grow more energy, focus on nuclear power, focus on natural gas. By far the two biggest potential needle movers on greenhouse gas emissions. He's not doing it for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. He's doing it to better energize the world, to win the AI race, to reindustrialize America, and to lower costs for American citizens. And we will announce later today from my department, the Department of Energy, the returning to the Treasury of over $13 billion of money that was slated to go out to subsidize wind, solar, and batteries and electric vehicles, which, by the way, do nothing for decarbonization, electric vehicles, zero. So in any case, that $13 billion, that's over $100 per American family. The Biden expenditures on fighting climate change are measured in the thousands of dollars per American family. What did that deliver? Higher taxes, higher utility bills, and guess what? President Biden, when he was inaugurated, 82% of US primary energy came from hydrocarbons. 4 years later, hundreds of billions of dollars later, 82% of US primary energy came from hydrocarbons. So those are the math, those are the numbers, and I welcome any and all questions. Thank God we're going to start a real dialogue around climate change and energy.
So please wait for the microphone to come to you, and I'll call on you and state your name and your media affiliation when I do. First question will go to for second row.
Hi, I'm Bastien Bouchot from Les Echos in France. I wanted to ask two questions about windmills and in the water. The administration has cancelled some projects that were very well advanced, almost entirely constructed. Can you explain what the rationale is behind that decision? Because when AI demand for electricity is booming, it seems like every energy is good to take. And my second question is, some European companies have invested a lot in renewables in the US and are planning to invest even more. Are they still welcome here after Mr. Trump's speech yesterday at the UN, where he was very critical of all renewables?
So, of course, we welcome investment in the United States, and President Trump's goal is the marketplace. Let the marketplace. 33 years we've subsidized wind and solar power in the United States. That's enough. If you can't rock on your own after 33 years, maybe that's not a business that's going places. I mentioned all the money that's been spent and the relatively low return in terms of energy and impact on people's lives. Another correction, no offshore wind farms have been canceled. They've been suspended work while we're investigating numerous complaints and lawsuits about what they've had on the right whale population, the fishery population. There was massive opposition to those projects. They got railroaded through by the Biden administration. There was a pause and a dialogue going on about those. No resolutions have been received. And you mentioned AI, critical. We want to lead in AI. And I hear often, we need all the electrons we can have on the grid, bring them all on, it'll help with AI. That's not how an electricity grid works. The vast majority of the time when you operate an electricity grid, there's huge excess capacity because you have to design your grid to keep everyone alive at peak demand time. And peak demand times are when it's cold in the winter, high pressure systems come in, bring an Arctic air mass, and they sit there. Demand for electricity goes way up. Thousands of people will die if electricity is off. When you have a high pressure system sitting there, it's stagnant air, you don't get wind power. It's coldest in the evening, the maximum demand, the sun isn't shining. So they don't provide electricity, and I document this extensively in Texas and around the country, that wind and solar have even lower reliability at peak demand times. That's the only time that matters. When the wind is blowing during the middle of the night, which is the windiest time, and you're getting wind electricity, it isn't replacing anything. It just means the natural gas power plants that provide much cheaper electricity have to turn down a little bit to accommodate that wind, and then when the wind stops, they have to turn back up again. You save about 2 cents per kilowatt hour of gas generation you stop. In most of our country, you save about 2 cents. In the Northeast, with expensive gas, you save about 3 cents. The government subsidy to the wind provider is 4 cents. The utility's paying them 10 cents, and then you got to have all these firming costs. So they don't actually enable us to create more data centers or grow our thing. If you're going to be useful on the electricity grid, you have to be there 24/7, and you particularly have to be there at peak demand times.
Okay, the next question will go second row, right in the orange dress.
Hi there, Darna Noor with The Guardian. You say your administration did not directly cancel wind projects, but you did put out stop work orders for ones that were fully permitted. Do you think it would be acceptable for future presidents, whether Democratic or Republican, to go after fossil fuel projects in this way, even those that are fully permitted?
Oh, it's happened extensively with the Keystone XS pipeline, with all sorts of administrations. We have in law, which is about 100 years old, mandated lease sales of public lands. Biden stopped doing those. So of course that has been the norm under Democratic administrations. Of course we don't want it to be the norm under Republican administrations as well, and it's not. We have 5 under construction offshore wind farms that are being carefully evaluated in discussions with developers, with people in the coastal communities to find the right answers there.
We'll go to third row, Yoshida Singh.
So much. Yoshida Singh, the Press Trust of India. Mr. Secretary, yesterday Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal said that India expects to increase its trade with the US on energy products in the years to come, and India's energy security goals will have a high element of US involvement. Against the backdrop of the 25% tariffs on Indian purchase of Russian oil, how do you see collaboration between India and the US in the field of energy? What are the conversations you're having with Delhi? Thank you.
So love your question. A lot of my early time when I arrived in my position was dealing with India, the world's largest democracy, an awesome ally of the United States, a fast-growing economy, a truly dynamic society that of course has rapidly growing energy demand because people are increasing their prosperity, their opportunities. I'm a huge fan of India. We love India. We look forward to more energy trade, more interactions back and forth with India. And then India is caught up in the middle of another issue. President Trump's greatest passion is peace in the world. He is, when I talk to him, it does not matter what the topic is, peace comes up. How can we use our tools and leverage to drive peace? And the Russian war in Ukraine, of course, is brutal. We all want to see it come to an end. But where does Russian oil today that's sanctioned go? You know, it goes to China, India, and it goes to Turkey. And so that helps Russia fund that war. And that's the friction. The friction's on that issue. We want to bring that war to the end. I believe the Indians want to bring that war to an end, and we want to expand our energy cooperation with India in natural gas, in coal, in nuclear, in clean cooking fuels, liquid petroleum gas. India's been a star in that area. So we want nothing more than more trade, energy cooperation with India.
Follow up. We'll go to the first row.
My name is Tomomi, and I'm working for GG Press, that is a Japanese media agency. And I have a question about Alaska LNG project. I think Japan's JERA and other Asian countries, Taiwan and other countries, showing interest in the project, but the cost is very high. It is estimated about $40 billion. So I think that's a problem, and that's hindering the project going forward. But so how are you seeing that project is going to be economically viable? Because the pipeline is quite long, 800 miles, and it's up in the north and it's on the ice sheet, so it's very expensive. And and also, if you have outlook for time frame of the project, please explain.
So great question about the Alaska LNG project, and you're right, it's a big project, 800-mile pipeline from the North Slope of Alaska down to coastal Alaska where the waters are open 12 months of the year. Fortunately, 50 years ago, we built an oil pipeline from the North Slope of Alaska down to coastal Alaska for oil exports. We built that pipeline in about 2 years, 50 years ago. The gas pipeline will go along the same corridor, so the roads, the support, the corridor for the pipeline is mostly already there. So I think it should be much easier than the first pipeline we built there. But all of these, to build LNG infrastructure to move gas is expensive. It takes upfront money. Natural gas is the fastest growing energy source on the planet by a fair margin. Since the financial crisis, world consumption of energy has grown by 100 exajoules. 35% of that has come from natural gas, growth in natural gas. 7.5% from wind, 7.5% from solar. So more than twice as fast as wind and solar combined, just in the growth rate, not in the size. So the more gas you can bring to people, the more gas demand grows. It's just limited by infrastructure. So we're talking to multiple companies, Japanese companies, Korean companies, Asian companies. I think the prospects for Alaskan LNG look quite strong. So I think that project should be under construction in the next 12 months-ish. It'll take a few years to build, but what's great is it's very short ship traffic from there to our awesome allies like Japan in East Asia. And at the end of the day, the gas that'll come out of there will be no more expensive than gas coming from all the other LNG export terminals. It's a global marketplace.
Wait from my microphone. The question was, who will finance the project?
Finance the project, those Asian countries and also the U.S. government.
I'm sure it'll be some mix of all of the above. I'm sure it'll likely be some mix of American companies, Asian companies. The U.S. government will probably support it a little bit from my department with credit support or whatever. Everyone will, I think, will come together. But look, we've built hundreds of billions of dollars of LNG export infrastructure in the United States, and we have more under construction now than ever before because of President Trump. So it's a big project, but that's President Trump's agenda, is to do big things in America again. But thanks, you for a great question.
We'll go to the third row. This one.
Thank you. Viviana Mazza from Corriere della Sera, Italian newspaper. I believe that today you're meeting, or you met, our Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani. I wanted to ask about Italy and Europe. What are the topics of the conversations with European countries regarding independence from Russian gas? I mean, have you found them open to this? And especially, is Turkey and Hungary and Slovakia like an important point in this, because they are the main buyers of Russian gas and oil? Thank you.
So thanks again for the great question. I was just in Italy 2 weeks ago in Milan and met with a number of businesses and government leaders there before I went to Brussels and then to Vienna. Yeah, very fruitful dialogues with Europe. Look, I think everybody wants to bring this war to an end. I think everyone knows depending on Russian energy not only threatened the security, economic and national security of the European nations, but the continued purchases are funding the Russian war machine. So you mentioned Hungary and Slovakia, who have not been as willing to pinch that off. But as far as the data, year to date this year, they're less than half of Europe's purchases of natural gas from Russia. They're buying the pipeline gas, but the rest of Europe is still importing a fair amount of LNG gas. All of that should be displaced by American LNG or gas supplies from elsewhere. I believe it will. There's a plan in Europe to do this, but almost over 2 years. We'd love to see that faster for peace reasons. We have plenty of places to sell the gas, so it's not like America needs a customer for that gas. But the faster we can displace Russian gas, the more pressure we can put on President Putin. And I haven't met with Italian ministers yet, but I will later today. I can't wait to do that. We've had great dialogues about energy trade and natural gas, about partnership and next generation nuclear energy, in AI and data centers and cooperation. But my trip to Europe was fantastic. Very candid, very open dialogues, way more common ground than disagreements.
Okay, we'll go to third row and come back to the front.
Hi, Mr. Secretary. My name is Ken Sakakibara with the Asahi Shimbun, Japanese media. It's very nice to see you again since the Wyoming rare earth groundbreaking. So my question is rare earth. So China has been dominating this field, the critical minerals and the rare earth. And my question is, will this situation pose a threat to the United States? And what kind of impact do you expect in the meeting between the President Trump and the President Xi Jinping?
Yeah, so look, I think China has followed a very intentional policy to get incredibly large market share and therefore control over the market for rare earth elements and processing them into magnets. These small magnets are designed into basically every device with a button on it. So they are ubiquitous throughout our systems. Shame on us, the United States and the rest of the world, to allow that industry to completely leave our countries. So yes, we are aggressively trying to reshore that capability in the United States and of course with friends in other friendly nations as well. We just need a more diversified supply chain there. I wish I could snap my fingers and do it in a month. It won't be in a month, but it'll be in a couple dozen months. An aggressive effort is underway, and again, thank you for traveling out to Wyoming for one of the efforts in that regards. Appreciate the question.
All right, we'll go to the first row.
Thank you very much for this great opportunity. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for this opportunity. As you know, in May, the Prime Minister of Kurdistan, His Excellency Masoud Barzani, visited Washington. You met with him, and he signed a $210 billion agreement on gas and oil with U.S. companies. How would you describe the significance of this agreement, and how important is it for economic relationship between Kurdistan region and the United States? I also have a follow-up question.
There's more journalists that
Yeah. So Nikki, great question, and all of that is true. I got to meet Prime Minister Barzani when he was here. So look, that President Trump's agenda, our whole Trump administration agenda, is more energy makes everyone better. More energy in the world means it's in general going to push costs down. It's going to allow humans to do more things. Kurdistan has great reserves. American companies are there. We would love to see more oil, more natural gas developed there, that marketplace to get it out. So I think it's very helpful for the people of Kurdistan. I think it's very helpful for America. It's very helpful for the world. So we are pro-energy. America's all in. We are the largest producer of oil and natural gas by far. So we've got lots to sell everywhere. But we're also happy to cooperate with others everywhere, including in Italy or anywhere, to produce more oil and gas there. You know, that's this climate mania that's thought somehow if we throttle oil and gas, we're going to make the world a better place. Europe was a major oil and gas producer. They just throttled their own production, drove up prices, pushed out their industries, and became dependent on Russia and others for their own resources. At least they should have depended on the United States or the Allies. So we are pro-energy in the U.S. and abroad.
We'll go to the gentleman standing in the back.
And I'm willing to stay longer, too. I can tell a bunch of great questions. I'm happy to extend, unless Ben cuts me off.
Thank you very much. Manish Wakmawal, Parliament Times, Pakistan. By announcing trade deal with Pakistan, President Trump said that we are working with Pakistan on a trade deal and we will develop their massive oil reserves. In this process, we are finalizing a company, and he jokingly said that might be one day Pakistan sell oil to India. What is the progress on doing oil exploration cooperation with Pakistan?
So I haven't spoken with American companies or dived into that issue yet, but based on your question, I'm excited to do that. I worked, and in fact my father-in-law worked on natural gas production in Pakistan 30 years ago. And as you know, Pakistan's got great natural gas resources. Investment dried up on those, so that production has declined, but those resources are there. I love President Trump's words, and of course we would love to partner with American companies and our governments to figure out how to better energize Pakistan. Thanks for the question. Now I'm going to go look into it. Appreciate that.
We'll continue with the back with Logan.
Thank you so much. I'm Logan Church from Television New Zealand. Thank you so much for your time. Many nations in the Pacific are already dealing with the effects of climate change, and they see it as an existential threat. Tuvalu is one example, and we have issues in New Zealand as well. What would you say to these smaller nations who look to bigger nations like the United States of America for global leadership on this issue?
So thanks for the question. Number one, we've had 30 years, more than 30 years since the Kyoto Protocols, right? We haven't even changed the trajectory of global greenhouse gas emissions. And the main reason is it's very hard to replace hydrocarbons. They were 83–84% of global energy when I was born. They're 83–84% of global energy today. I went to college to work on fusion energy at MIT. I worked on solar energy at UC Berkeley. I worked on geothermal energy after that. I was a board member of a geothermal company, a nuclear company. We are all in getting energy from everywhere we can, and still are all in. You will not see more progress on nuclear from any other administration than you will see from this administration, and from natural gas, which to date has been the biggest driver of reduced emissions by far. Natural gas is growing its stack among the hydrocarbons, and it's the lowest carbon intensity of the hydrocarbons. But Tuvalu, I hear a lot about that. Tuvalu, as most of these Pacific Island nations, they're atolls, they're coral atolls. They rise and fall with sea level. If you took the total area of them, it's grown about 1% in the last 50 years. Sea level's risen a few inches, but sea level's risen 400 feet in the last 12,000 years, and those islands have risen up with that, and when sea levels fall, those islands will go back down again. So climate change is not nothing. Sea levels are rising. It's a real thing, but we should be honest and credible about it, and getting everyone scared that their nations are going to be swallowed up, and 20% of kids have nightmares about climate change. That's just an unrealistic presentation of it. You know, as we write in our report, which is just directly from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there's been no increase in the number of hurricanes, the intensity of hurricanes, of floods, of droughts. In fact, extreme damage from extreme weather globally as a percent of the economy is on a 50-year decline. Deaths from extreme weather is on a century-long decline, over 95% decline. A better energized society can deal with the vagaries of extreme weather. It's terrifying, it's scary. I've been near hurricanes. They're awful things, but they're as old as human civilization. And we've not seen changes in trends for them, but we have a society that's way better able to withstand them. Thank you for the question.
Okay, we'll go to second row with the glasses.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the briefing. I'm Malakon from the Epoch Times. I would like to ask your thoughts about this new deal, Canada mining deal, Lithium America. How significant is this for the Trump administration, and is this going to be a new pattern? Meaning, is the government going to invest in private companies going forward? And also, if you can, we would like to ask you about your thoughts on Arkansas Smackover Formation lithium project and how significant that is. We have a team covering the project at the moment, so they would like to know your thoughts about this project as well.
Thanks so much for the question. And back to your colleague from Japan asking about rare earth elements. Absolutely, we want to reduce U.S. dependence on imports of critical materials. Lithium's not top of that list, but it's on that list. We don't produce meaningful lithium in the United States today. We would like to. The Smackover Formation, you know, getting lithium out of brines, that's a promising idea. We want private capital to decide what's going to get developed and where things are going, but are we going to invest and help alongside them to develop critical mineral resources in the United States? Absolutely. I think if we have economically viable projects we can help nudge along in the Smackover, we'll do that. Certainly the mine in Nevada, the Thacker Pass mine, in dialogues right there to try to get that mine to completion and come online. So I say it's hard to build big things in America. Mines has been worst of all. U.S. was an awesome mining nation. We just made it so hard to mine anything here that we've hardly opened any new mines. We want to change that. We're going to build mines in America again. It's not just because we need those minerals. It's jobs and economic activity. So thank you for the question.
We'll go to second row right here.
Thanks, Secretary Wright. Sarah Schoenhart for E&E News. There are plenty of countries who feel like it's economically valuable and good for energy security to invest in renewables. So why attack them for taking that approach? Why encourage them to drill for oil? And given the president's comments yesterday, is there any world in which you would go to the COP30 climate talks in November?
So thanks for the question. And of course, different countries can make their own decisions on their energy systems, right? What President Trump is and what I am is just a spokesman for what America is doing and saying, hey, if you want to join us, here's why we're doing it. Everybody thinks we're out of sync with the world, but in fact, we're just focused on humans instead of a political cause. Climate change is physically a real thing, but it's really just turned into a political cause. So you said plenty of nations think it's in their best interest. That may or may not be true. They have invested in it, but I'm still looking for that successful case study. I'll tell you, I just came back from Europe where the percent investment and the early mover investment was the largest, and the overall impacts in just dramatically higher energy prices and the outsourcing of blue-collar working-class jobs, I think has been pretty brutal to watch from a distance. Europe and the United States were both 25% of global consumption before the financial crisis. Since then, the United States in dollar terms, our economy's grown well over 80%. Europe's grown less than 10%. As they went down an expensive energy trajectory, they have stopped economic growth. And congratulations, they went from 80% of their energy from hydrocarbons to 75, 76%. So a lot of money brings high prices, not much meaningful transformation in the total energy system. The focus is always just on the electricity grid. But if you make electricity expensive, people become poorer and jobs leave. So that's their choices. But what we're just sharing is the math and the numbers and the U.S. vision and where we're going. Regarding that COP30, I don't have any plans to go there, but as you know, I'm very passionate to have these dialogues about energy and climate change, particularly with people that see it differently, to have those back and forth. So nothing's impossible.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions. I'll go to the gentleman in the back with the blue jacket.
Hello, thank you, Secretary. My name is Jake Biddle. I'm from GRIST. The Department of Energy has issued orders to prevent the closure of 2 coal power plants, one in Pennsylvania and one in Michigan. I believe the operator of the Michigan... Okay.
We can hear you.
I believe the operator of the Michigan plant has told the SEC it cost them about $29 million over 5 weeks to run that. There's an estimate that it could cost billions of dollars by 2028 if the department were to prevent further closures. I'm just wondering, President Trump took office promising to halve electricity bills. Those operators are trying to recoup those costs from ratepayers. How does the department's ambition to stop the closure of coal plants square with Trump's ambition to cut utility bills?
So thanks for the question. You talked about the Mount Pleasant coal plant. Southwestern Michigan, 1.5 gigawatts, was promised by a previous governor of Michigan in a political statement. We're going to close all our coal plants because that was in fashion. Still in fashion in most of the world today. It should not be in fashion. Coal has been the largest source of global electricity for 125 years, and it will be for decades more, no matter what politicians do. But the closure of that plant, I got a lot of pushback on it, just like you said, in keeping that open. Number one, 2 days after the plant was slated to close and we kept it open, there was a brownout in MISO, our tightest electricity region, and that plant ran at full capacity. The brownout would have been a blackout, so we don't want blackouts. And there's that number thrown around that it cost them $29 million to run that plant over the ensuing, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. And that's true. But just look a little bit further. It cost them $29 million to run it, and guess what? They got $36 million of revenue. That's called profit. You know, when you sell a product, you have your cost and you have your revenue. And when your revenue is greater than your cost, that's a profit. So the plant ran profitably. And over the whole summer, if you look at the utilization of that plant, it was higher than the average utilization of all existing power plants in the United States, higher than the average utilization. So that plant was critical to preventing blackouts in MISO. And I think anyone carefully looking at that grid would tell you that and agree with that. And so now we're just talking with utilities. And of course, more utilities are coming out of the woodwork saying, yes, shoot, we got forced to agree to close our coal plants. Can you help us? We don't want to close our coal plants. We don't have an answer for that. So I think it's going to be a trend. If we close all our coal plants, we'll drive electricity prices up, which is what Obama did, and and Biden did. That's why we got higher prices. We want lower prices and more electricity.
With respect, sir, there's also one in PJM.
Just wait for the microphone, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's also been a closure prevention in PJM in Pennsylvania, which exports electricity. As you probably know, they have more than they need. And the utilities are trying to recoup the costs by increasing ratepayer bills. So maybe they ran profitably, but the utilities seem to think that they need more money from the ratepayers. So if you could answer that part of the question, I'd be grateful.
No, having the capacity to prevent blackouts is by far the best way to put electricity prices down, because prices spike. Wholesale prices spike when you're near a blackout. California's average price of electricity throughout the day is no more expensive than the United States, but they have such a critically stressed system that their high prices at peak demands make their average electricity price twice the United States. So electricity is complicated, but when you shut down things that can produce electricity 24/7 and replace them with things that sometimes produce electricity, it is a guaranteed way to make electricity more expensive, and the data everywhere has shown that.
Okay, we'll take one question in the back.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for your time and for this press briefing. I'm Musala from Azerbaijan News Agency report. Please bear with me. I have 3 questions. Okay. Bilateral agreement signed in Washington opened a new prospect for Azerbaijan and the United States. So they emphasize that beyond political and strategic partnership, energy will be a key area of expansion. I'm just wondering, also, could you please elaborate more on the future of bilateral energy cooperation between 2 countries? Additionally, how do you assess Azerbaijan's role as a strategic bridge bridge between East and West, shaping of the future of global energy. Thank you so much.
Yes, yeah, you bet. I was at the meetings there for the peace deal and whatever between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So the oil industry, we say, started in the United States in 1859 in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The other place the oil industry began in a very similar time frame was in Baku in Azerbaijan. So we have both been the original producers of oil and gas in the world. Azeris have great reserves, and I think this corridor along the southern end of the border to bring Armenia and Azerbaijan together could allow more natural gas to come from Azerbaijan into Europe. I think that's fantastic. So yeah, developing Azeri energy resources and getting them to markets around the world, and particularly in the opposite direction as Russia, to European and Western markets, we think is a great future cooperation between our countries.
All right, we have time for one more question. I know Katie has had a question in the front row. No? Okay, all right, second row. I know
Katie's a martyr. Someone else gets it.
In the black.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this, and Secretary, thank you so much for doing this as well. When you talk about the friction with India, what are the solutions that the U.S. is providing to India to stop the import or reduce the import from Russia, Venezuela, Iran? What is the solution, and are you planning to meet your Indian counterpart for a dialogue or some kind of a conversation going forward?
Absolutely. I met the Indian foreign minister on inauguration night and began a dialogue about cooperation and the future pathway between our countries. The Russia trying to find peace in Ukraine is a sticky thing, and we are both within the cabinet in the United States and with our allies trying to find the most creative ways to get this war to end. President wants nothing more than this war to end, and it would have the additional benefit of removing a source of friction. I am all in on energy cooperation, trade cooperation with India. I think there's a bright future there, but somehow we got to figure out how to work together to put the maximum pressure to bring the war to an end.
But what are the solutions? Like any one solution that you can pinpoint? Rely on the U.S. for energy?
Oh, well, there's lots of oil exporters in the world. You know, India doesn't need to buy Russian oil, right? India buys Russian oil because they can buy it for cheaper. Because Russia, nobody wants to buy Russian oil, so they have to sell it at a discount. India has decided to make the trade-off to buy cheaper oil and sort of look the other way, that's giving money to a guy who's murdering thousands of people every week. So yeah, of course, we wish India would work with us to buy this. You can buy oil from every nation on the earth, just not Russian oil. That's our position. America has oil to sell, but so does everybody else. We don't want to punish India. We want to end the war, and we want to grow our relations with India.
That concludes today's briefing. Sir, I want to thank you for joining us today. You have a busy schedule this week. This briefing is on the record. The transcript will be posted on our website at fpc.state.gov later today. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank all of you. Look, you took time. You all brought awesome questions. I wish I could have answered everyone else's. This is the goal of the Trump administration, is to have a more realistic dialogue. I want to hear from people that disagree with me every bit as much as people that agree with me. I loved the questions today. It was fantastic. Look forward to seeing all of you at future press events. But keep staying on the energy climate beat. It matters for the world. Appreciate you all.